Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. So I've been thinking a lot about the Cathay and Tzeentch mechanics reveals. Let's be very honest, they do sound pretty awesome and they're going to be quite fun. And it can also be assumed that Khorne, Kislev, Nurgle, Slaanesh and whoever the pre-order incentive is going to have, well, pretty cool mechanics just like that, with their own different racial flavor of course. So obviously, Warhammer 3 races are looking to be quite different and quite varied in terms of mechanics, but then this makes me think about Game 1 and Game 2 races, as there are quite a bit and a few of them, well, yeah, they need new mechanics. I wouldn't say that all the races need a complete rework, but some of them do need a bit more flavor if they're going to compare against Cathay, Tzeentch, and all the others. So why don't we go down a list of all the established races and factions in Warhammer 1 and 2 and see what could be added in to make them more comparable to Warhammer 3 races. Nothing has to be really complex, but just a bit more fun. Alright, let's start off with the Empire. So the Empire itself, if you remove the Elector Count mechanic, they're pretty much just a standard faction, kind of like anything that you'd see from a medieval Total War instead. They've already had their rework, but, well, if we compare it to Warhammer 3, it's kind of uninspired, isn't it? In all honesty, I'd say that the Empire doesn't really need too much, but what I would suggest is some sort of faith mechanic. As right now, when you basically play with the Empire, you always hear Sigmar this, Sigmar that, Sigmar this, Sigmar that. The fact is that the Empire itself isn't wholly devoted to Sigmar. In fact, yes, Sigmar is one of the strongest gods throughout that pantheon, but there's also Ulrich, Tal, Mor, and so many other gods that maybe it could be nice to have a sort of faith fervor mechanic. Kinda inspired by corruption in a sense, but you would be able to build up a holy building dedicated to a specific god. And what that would do is build up a fervor, same way as how corruption builds up, but as you go up through the thresholds, you'll be able to get certain benefits from, say for example, Tal, or Ulrich, or anyone, even Sigmar too. Granted, this would only benefit you provincially as you expand your empire itself, but it would be kind of fun, and say if you get to 100% with Sigmar or 100% to Ulrich, you'll be able to get a special unit that is likely recolored or retextured, but dedicated to that specific god with specific abilities to that god. I think something like that would be kind of fun, and it would give you a lot more to play with when you start expanding. This is also quite thematic if you're playing, say for example, as Boris Todbringer. He's an Ulrichian, not a Sigmarite, so when he eventually becomes a fully fledged playable legendary lord, well, that means that you could take over and make the whole empire Ulrichian if you want to. We know stuff like this is possible because we've seen it in a Total War Saga Troy when it comes to the whole taking the special unit monster, so why can't this be done something here in that sense? It would be kind of cool, and you'd be able to just dedicate yourself to your chosen god. I myself prefer Mor, and would rather dedicate my provinces and my armies to Mor than Sigmar. But hey, maybe I just like the gothic look. Next we'll look towards the vampire counts, and honestly the vampire counts are fine. Now, keep in mind the following. As a race, they've got really decent faction mechanics such as the Blood Kiss mechanic and obviously being able to raise armies if they go to areas where big battles have been fought and so on, so they're okay. The only thing that's really missing is unique faction mechanics for certain lords like Manfred, Vlad, and of course different legendary lords for different bloodlines, but that would count as faction mechanics, not race mechanics. Something that could be interesting, considering the fact that the vampire count currency is known as dark magic, would be allowing to be able to use your currency to influence the world in a certain way. Think of it like a shop that can affect enemy provinces, where you'll be able to use dark magic to add more vampiric corruption to an area in small intervals or even large intervals if you're paying a lot of cash. Yeah, it might not be the most exciting thing, but think about it this way. Your armies won't have to take that much attrition or no attrition at all, and you won't have to wait ages for corruption to go through. Yeah, you can bypass this by keeping your army on, say for example, raid stance, but then your units are tired and so on. If you want them completely fresh, this might be a fun way to do it, and it's something minor but kind of cool. I know a lot of people are going to be saying vampire coves too, or covens, which probably sounds better, so yeah, covens, but I think that would probably stay with just Neferata just so they could give us something unique. Though I would say that the vampire counts are in a very good place at the moment, yet they still need a bit more flavour, if anything just a tiny bit more. Truth be told, the same could be said about the Greenskins. Their last rework was pretty decent and it gave them a lot more flavour, specifically stuff revolving around the war mechanic and anything else. Again, all we really need from the Greenskins is a bit more variety, a legendary lord for the forest goblins, and more generic lord options and troop options, as the Greenskins had the most in terms of numbers when you look towards the 8th edition army book. There was just so many different subcultures. The Dwarfs themselves have had 2 reworks, so I very much doubt that Creative Assembly would be willing to go back and look at them again, which is a massive shame, as yes, right now they're quite unique, a lot of stuff has come into effect to bring them more up to speed, but I think they could benefit from another bar-style mechanic, very much like the progress bars that you have for Grudges, or pretty much any other race that has one, which could be centered around, say, possibly reuniting the Lost Holds. It's something which the Dwarves have in their lore. They want to go back and find every single Lost Hold, which might be infested with demons, marauders, or was just taken over by Skaven or orcs. So many holds have actually been lost through the ages, but it's really embedded into their lore, and it could be nice to have some sort of progress bar where you'd eventually get more and more bonuses after you get more and more holds. There could be a negative attached to it if you take too long, but then that might be too similar to the grudge mechanic, and a lot of people aren't too keen on that as it is. Bretonia is okay, they have a lot of decent stuff. The only thing I'd say they're missing is a crusade mechanic, which could tie up to the chivalry mechanic too. The crusade mechanic could easily be in a very similar sense to how the Greenskins get a trophy. So the further away your enemy, the more chivalry you'd be able to get, and it would just be kind of nice to give you incentive to go out and crusade. The closer the enemy, the less chivalry, and it would just be a way to fill up your chivalry bar faster, possibly increasing the requirements for chivalry, but it's kind of thematic, you'll enjoy it more, and it would give you some reason to go and attack Lustria, or maybe even Cathay. It just means that you'll be able to go out and have a lot more fun fighting more varieties of enemies. I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but the Beastmen are fine. Yeah, after the last rework, they're okay. They have a lot of flavor to them. They actually are quite enjoyable to play now, and they're not a complete joke as they are in the tabletop. I'm just surprised as you guys weren't even saying this because, well, the Beastmen have been a joke for so long, I honestly can't believe that they're actually playable. The Wood Elves I'd also say are perfectly fine as they are. I've looked through their army books and to be honest I don't see anything that they're missing mechanically. All they're really missing is more legendary lord options and possibly more magical forests. My only real concern about the Wood Elves in Game 3 is I really hope that Creative Assembly don't forget to make more magical forests in the 3rd and final game. They desperately need it if a bunch of new area is going to be added in. Okay, let's look towards Norsker. Now, Norsker is a bit of a shit show because, yeah, they needed a massive rework, and unfortunately, it's already been confirmed that they're not getting walls in Warhammer 3. Whoop-de-doo. Sorry, I just end up dying inside every time I want to play Norsker because, well, let's be honest, they're just not fun to play. But I would say that the whole dedicating to yourself to a Chaos God thing works rather well. In terms of mechanics, it could be even better. If, say for example, if you dedicate yourself to a god, you'll be able to recruit demon units from any of the monogod factions that are going to be implemented soon enough. And a slight change by adding a 5th route about allowing Chaos Undivided. So say for example, if you pick Khorne, you'll be able to go all the way through, get a Bloodthirster, get some Juggernauts and so on, but if you go Undivided, you'll only be able to get some basic units like Bloodletters, Plague Bearers and so on. It'll give you more reason to play as Norsker, and hopefully they'll have some settlements even if they don't have walls, because I am really worried about Norsker's eventual rework if they can't have walls. Who knows, maybe they've got something else in mind, but I'm just a little worried. Warriors of Chaos, I honestly don't want to comment on just yet. We know that they're going to get a rework eventually, so we don't know exactly what they are going to get. They deserve a lot of different stuff. Like, for example, right now they're just basically Warriors of Chaos Undivided, and it would be nice if they had some units from all of the monogods, just some basic warriors and so on, maybe a way to dedicate your basic Chaos Lords to make them Chaos Lords of Slaanesh, Chaos Lords of Nurgle, and so on and so forth. A little quest tree, something like that would be fun. And a massive fix to Horde factions, because, yeah, I mean, a lot of things need to change for the Warriors of Chaos, and I'd rather wait until Creative Assembly drop their rework, and hopefully that's the last time we'll need to talk about the Warriors of Chaos in a bad light. We're going to move on to the races from Warhammer 2, and we'll start off with the Skaven, mainly because the Skaven really don't need anything in terms of racial mechanics. They're perfectly fine. Again, this is just for racial mechanics, not faction. The Skaven themselves are one of the races with the more faction mechanics, able to have all these different types of playstyles, different mechanics, and so on. So I think they're fine. The only thing is, obviously, Clan Pestilence and Clan Moors need their own mechanic, because that's why they're big clans. Lizardmen. Okay, so the Lizardmen aren't in a really good place at the moment. They've kind of lagged behind, and they're kind of boring to play. While they do have some unique mechanics, like for example the Sacred Spawnings, which could be a bit more in depth to give them a bit more flavor. Say for example having a dial which kinda controls what the Sacred Spawnings do. So if you want them more defensive, you can have them with higher defense. If you want them to be better at attacking, you can have them with higher attack. It all really depends on what is needed, because that's what the Sacred Spawnings were essentially in the lore. When you would have spawnings, sometimes some skinks would be spawned to be stealthier, hence chameleon skinks and so on, and it would just be nice to be able to have defensive Saurus, aggressive Saurus. It's just, it fits with the theme, and it would be nice just to have something different, something that you can control. Next, well, we need something to do with Sacred Plaques, because we don't really have Sacred Plaques when it comes to the Lizardmen. There is some stuff with the mini-games when you try to go into settlements and search for them, but it's not for the Lizardmen. It would be cool if, say for example, there were different plaques that you could find in different areas, like sacking settlements or taking over settlements. These plaques would offer interesting quests which would determine how the Great Plan works. Well, better yet said, how you would interpret the Great Plan. And it just fits with the lore so well. It's just something really basic, but it can add a lot of flavor to the faction. Don't get me wrong, they need a proper rework, as right now the Lizardmen are just not really enjoyable, but some extra flavor does really help. Dark Elves. Okay, so Dark Elves at the moment, yeah, they need help. The mechanics are kind of bare. Slavery from the Dark Elves is pretty basic and could be done with a bit of a visual overhaul and some extra spice added to the mix. Keep in mind that the Dark Elves are known slavers, so if there was a sort of quota to be filled to get some rewards, that would be kind of cool. I think the best way to explain it would be kind of like a bounty board, where you would say have a separate tab with a quota that needs to be filled of slaves from different races and factions. So let's use an example here where you would get 500 slaves from Bretonia. That means you would have to leave your frozen landscape and go down to Bretonia or any location where some Bretonian factions may be. You would then go and sack settlements, do the usual stuff, and be able to pick up the slaves. After you have the 500, you can then send those slaves to be sold, and you'd get a big chunk of cash, well, medium to big. But then the next time that you want to sell off Bretonian slaves, instead of 500, by the way, these numbers are just being made up, so yeah, it could be more, but instead of 500, it could then be 1,000, which obviously means that it would keep increasing. So that means that if you've done a lot of damage to, say, the High Elves, which are closest to the Dark Elves, then you wouldn't really get a lot of value from the slaves. However, at this point, Grand Cathay, which if you're in around mid to late game campaign, you've not been selling Cathayan slaves, meaning that you can still go by the 500, 1,000 system and so on, meaning that their slaves are far more valuable than that of High Elves, which you've probably destroyed by this point anyway. I think something like that really fits well with the lore, and it could just be kind of fun. Also, some incentive for the Dark Elves to take over Orthwad, though that's likely more of a faction mechanic for Malekith, as obviously, you know, Phoenix King during the end times. Yeah, let's keep that to individual faction mechanics. The High Elves are a weird one, because they feel fine, but they're really not fine, as the only real mechanic that they have to distinguish them from others is that of the influence mechanic, and even then, the Empire has a stripped down version of that, so the High Elves definitely need something to give them a bit more flavor, and there's only really one thing I can think of. That is a expedition. As you may or may not know, the High Elves do tend to branch out in very weird ways. They don't tend to leave off one a lot, but every now and then they will set up a colony somewhere else. Maybe they're important magical ley lines and stuff like that. It could be cool if, say, you could build up with your influence and be able to send out an expedition. This expedition would spawn an army depending on the amount of influence that you use in a location that is available. So think of this as Menelaus from a Total War saga Troy, where he's able to settle a colony with a settlement that's been abandoned anywhere throughout the map. Usually, I think it's actually tied to anything next to a coastal region, which kind of makes sense. So you send off a high elf expedition, which would allow you to experiment with different areas. Or say, for example, Cathay is getting too big and you want to launch an invasion there. So there's an open settlement and then you can start building up and then eventually declare war. Or you want to help Cathay versus the Demons of Chaos, as is expected that loads of demons will be attacking Cathay. It just really depends. I'm just giving some basic examples, but it could work as the Menelaus mechanic is actually quite good and it would fit with the high elf lore pretty well. The Vampire Coast, I believe, are perfectly fine. Keep in mind that race packs that were introduced in Warhammer 2 were normally done to a very good standard. They've got some fun mechanics, such as the Vampire Coves, which is fantastic when wanting to get some more cash in, and digging for treasure is always fun. I think they're fine. I don't think they need anything else, barring possibly a Legendary Lord more or two. That would be kind of fun, and a few new units, maybe in the future. And lastly, the Tomb Kings, which have one of the best campaigns, if not the best campaign, in terms as a faction. They've got great mechanics, they've got a great system, nothing really needs to change for them. They will need more incentive to move to, say for example, the Chaos Waste and so on, which is funny because Cetra never actually managed to get to Grand Cathay, so we don't actually know how that would have been about. This is of course back in the day when Cetra was mortal, so maybe a form pyramid mechanic would be nice when you're heading towards those territories, but I'm perfectly content with the Tomb Kings getting nothing new in terms of mechanics as a faction. Like, if they get anything new in terms of Legendary Lords, new mechanics will need to be done, and I think that stuff will eventually come into effect, but that's only when Nagash eventually gets released. They haven't said anything, but we kind of know it's coming, right? Like, he's too big not to bring in. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.